Hi everyone. First of all, for those who celebrate Happy Lunar New Year, 恭喜发财. And my name is Dr. Jingfeng Xu, as Dalis mentioned, and I'm from Arup. It's my great pleasure to present to you during this very festival season to share with you some of the interesting and hopefully inspiring work we in Arup have been doing to resolve some of those significant challenges as the world we are facing in the built environment by using the digital innovations and solutions. Before the main part of the presentation, I thought I may just quickly introduce to you who Arup is and what primarily we do. Oops, here you go. Arup, we are the creative force for many of those world's most prominent projects in the built environment across all industry, and have been working with a footprint of 140 countries with a project inside there. And we are a group of designers, engineers, architects, planners, consultants, and the specialists work with our clients on those innovative projects, complex projects with the highest quality and impact. We last financial year ending, we had 2.2 billion pounds of global turnover income, and we have more than 75 plus years of profitable trading in the world. We have 18,000 plus employees located in 34 countries, 94 offices, with headquartered in London. Our creative spark and intellectual independence has always been there from the very beginning. Those 6 shared values, as you can see from the screen, like the firm's name, are essentially derived from the beliefs and convictions of the firm's founder, the philosopher and engineer, Sir Arup. Our very unique trust ownership structure means our people are free to pursue the firm's vision to shape a better world rather than just choose short-term shareholder returns. So for Arup, creating a better world is all about creating a more sustainable future. Our work in the built environment leaves a significant legacy to the subsequent generations. We contribute meaningfully to the UNSDG goals, create better outcomes for people, place, and the planet. So sustainable development is really everything we do. So it's really my great pleasure today to be invited by Venturous to present to you how digital innovation is creating opportunities for cities, infrastructure, and the whole life cycle of built environment from our Arup perspective to create a sustainable future. First of all, digitalization, as you probably know, digitalization to the built environment still in its infancy. Why so challenging for the digitalization of the built environment? We believe there are probably 3 main reasons. First, the construction sector is very fragmented. The European Commission estimates that up to 98% of the construction value chain is composed of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. The typical construction project involves a multitude of independent manufacturers, subcons, suppliers, who are responsible for the individual life cycle phases. Each of those phases, for instance, design, procurement, construction, maintenance, is affected by different stakeholders at different moments in time. Secondly, the built environment involves a large number of complex process and people. However, most of the digitalization strategy focus on technology rather than optimization of process in a very systematic way. The last key reason we think is, generally speaking, the construction sector invests relatively little resources in R&D. With low productivity and limited margins, there are very few organizations that make significant financial investment in R&D. The overall spending in R&D with the construction sector is probably less than 1% of the revenues, while other sectors typically spend about 4%. So as a result, the successful rates on digital transformation of traditional sectors in the built environment is much lower than other more digitally savvy sectors, such as media and the finance industries. However, equally, we believe there is a huge potential in digitalization for the built environment. There is a 57 trillion estimated global spend on infra projects required by 2030 to keep up with the global GDP growth. And boosting the productivity in the built environment could increase the industrial value by approximately 1.6 trillion. That contributes about 2% of the global economy. So significant opportunity ahead. So thankfully, despite its challenging, after a slow start across a wide range of areas, we gradually start to see the digital solutions developed, providing a step change on the pathway to net zero, regenerating nature while meeting human needs. So why is that happening? In part, because those of us who work in the built environment are facing some very profound challenges. We need to change the way we work if we are going to meet those challenges by 2050. By 2050, we estimate that we need to provide and meet the equitable needs of 10 billion humans. Among them, 2.5 billion more people will be living in the cities by 2050. However, up to 80% of the buildings in use have already been built. And we need to live within our planetary boundaries, especially in carbon, where we have already spent 80% of its carbon budget for the 1.5 degrees agreed. And of course, nature, where nature systems have been systematically degraded. We have to change our operating model, our business model, as well as our economic model, if we're going to meet the needs of people and the natural environment where people live in. In addition, change is also happening because there is an onset of very exciting new technologies which are of particular relevance to the built environment. From our scan of those technologies, we believe there are 6 key ones or 6 families of technologies. The AI and the ML, which analyze and interpret large volume data, identifying these patterns, predict the future conditions, and optimize system for more efficient and sustainable operation of those assets. There's various sensors, drones, and satellite technologies that collects data on environmental conditions, natural ecosystems, and those data is then used to make informed decisions and monitor the process of addressing the climate change. The third one is the digital twin for simulation operations. That developer system use a computer model and the real world data to monitor and optimize and assets functionality and can learn and become autonomous over time. I'm sure you're also very familiar with the IoT, 5G, as well as cloud computing that enables the connection and the communication exchange of data with various devices. Another technology I've been seeing, observing, actually getting quite a bit of momentum is actually generative design that generate and optimize a virtual representation of the physical buildings and the infrastructure before construction or refurbishment to ensure very sustainable and minimal resource consumption. Lastly, the robotics and automation that enhances, automates the process in several sectors, including renewable energy, energy efficient buildings, as well as sustainable transportation. Those 6 technologies, we believe, are providing us great opportunities to do things in a different way and a better way than before. So let me talk through some examples we have been doing in Arup to improve and change that we need to do to meet needs, cut carbon, and promote nature. First example, let me take a project we did in Shanghai originally. Actually, I was born in Shanghai, so I know Shanghai really too well. Shanghai is a city that suffers challenging of a flooding problem, which have to shut down the business and sector of the economy sometimes. So it's a very significant problem. A few years ago, the Shanghai city government asked the built environment experts to develop a new master plan for dealing with such an urban flooding issue they constantly had. Of course, the traditional way of doing that is to understand where the water lands and where we want it to go. And then we built an enormous underground concrete piping system that takes the water from A to B. That's a very traditional way and a very carbon intensive and expensive. So when this traditional plan was proposed, the Shanghai government said that that's not good enough. Then we took a challenge and we approached in a quite different way. We took satellite data, as you can see from the screen here, and interpreted them in a patch level. And we trained machine learning algorithms to identify micro features of the landscape within Shanghai, such as roadways, local parks, industrial features, small scale developments, pedestrian areas. So a level of granularity that hadn't been able to do previously because we hadn't been able to have access to those kind of satellite data, the geospatial data, and the analytical capabilities of machine learning. So with those, we use that macro understanding of the Shanghai, we developed a completely different proposal to the city, one that uses green features, blue features, as well as gray features. That is actually traditional underground concrete, a combination of them to solve this problem. With this approach that uses small scale plantings, micro river in areas, adaptable pavements, and any sponge area to provide a much better solution to Shanghai drainage challenges. It's used environmental nature as well as some of the traditional solutions for far better outcome that we think was 30% cheaper in cost as well as carbon. So we have now done that for many other cities around the world, using the power of satellite data and machine learning to provide detailed insight about multiple cities around the world to understand the potential of nature-based solutions or sponge cities to solve the city problems in a new way. Of course, those sort of approaches can be extended to how we can plan our city infrastructure as well, in a far better way, actually. So on the left-hand side is a case of piece of work that we have done in Hong Kong, the second generation city mapping for Kowloon East, to provide a real-time view of the city for improved planning of that city area. Likewise, in Germany, actually in Europe, there's enormous amount of money going into the development of smart city solutions to try and improve the way in which cities work for their citizens. So in this case, what we show on the right-hand side, examples of understanding the city for improved traffic behavior, sustainable transport, as well as mobility by deploying the power of data and the digital twins at the city level to improve how cities operate and work. And of course, it is also allowing far greater coordination what cities do with those technologies. So this example now I'm showing we've done in London, where we took 35,000 different projects and mapped them consistently within the city of London. Then it seeks to reduce the impact of maintaining and developing London's infrastructure on residents and businesses. And by bringing together those data from those individual infrastructure projects into one place, then the data can then be used to identify the collaboration opportunities between them, and therefore, as mentioned earlier, to reduce the impact to the residents and the businesses. So the early examples are all about the cities where we use technology for cities. In addition to cities, actually, other sectors are also facing and needing to go through very profound transformations. So if we think about the energy system in these two particular examples here, the net zero energy system of the future, it's going to be a very different one from the energy system we have had in the past. It's going to be much more decentralized, as you would imagine. It's going to be much more renewably generated. It's going to be much more real-time. It's going to involve many and a much complicated ecosystem of plug-in cars with real-time usage of intermittent power supply. So the future energy system can only be one that is digital and real-time in its data. There's no net zero system. I think it would be great that there won't have any net zero energy system. There won't have any net zero planet without the fundamental underpinnings and enablings from technology and data, and the insights, the innovation that come out of that. For example, in UK, Arup are working with the National Grid, which is the operator and the owner of the grid, to develop the world's first virtual energy system, a digital twin of the entire grid. The National Grid knows that if they are going to provide the energy of the future, they need to have the full suite of digital tools deployed in order to make that transition to a completely different grid and to operate and manage it on real time. So again, the power of digital twins now underpinning the energy transformation, and likewise in some other areas as well. One of the big challenges that we need to make is move from gas to hydrogen. Hydrogen obviously is still a net zero fuel, very challenging to achieve. One of the things we want to do is to look at whether we can use the existing infrastructure, such as gas infrastructure, to convert that into a hydrogen infrastructure. And if we could do so, the transition from gas to hydrogen would be much, much cheaper than we have to build from sort of from scratch. That transition couldn't happen without the full power of digital tools, technologies, insight, and data analytics. That the modeling goes around that, and allowing decisions that can be made to get to net zero in a much better way. Just as powerfully for the energy sector, the transportation sector is facing the most profound set of technical changes that has ever had as well. And the part of that is being driven by the onset of new kind of transport methods. But of course, a lot of it is being driven by the need to get to net zero, developing electrical vehicles, hydrogen-based transport, which is a transport system compatible with the net zero future. So all cities around the world trying to understand how they can move to the zero emissions that involve a completely different vehicle system. However, planning and implementing that transition could be an extremely expensive, a complicated one, or it could be much, much more cost-effective if we get that transition right. In Arup, we're developing zero-emission platforms that bring the energy system and the transport system into one single coherent platform. It allows the cities and the fleet operators to take the best decisions about where and how they move towards a zero emissions world by deciding where you do charging, when you do charging, and how frequent and how you do charging in consistent and joined up way. So which is a critical part of the transition to net zero. On the right-hand side, equally, we need to, in our transport systems, start to actually understand how people want to use our transport system, where they want to go, where people want to go, and when they want to go, what transport people want to use. That involves something called agent-based modeling. Our understanding of the transport sector in people's genuine needs and choices. And once we can do that, we can achieve a transport transition in a very different way. That one that engage with how people really want to use the transport, makes public investment and the private transport choices rooted in people's needs and improve significantly. Again, our ability to reduce air pollution, get to net zero, and meet people needs. It's only possible now. It's only possible now because of the sophistication of the algorithms and the machine learning that underpin those kind of systems is made available to us now. Another challenge facing the transport linear infrastructure sector is its asset management. Digital asset management system provides a unique opportunity for data collection, data management, real-time defect identification, automatic upload into an organization's EM system while fully deployed and integrated API. One example Arup has been doing in Australia is to assist one of the councils, Moreton Bay Regional Council, MBRC, with the transition from its reactive to a proactive road asset management system. We work with the council to develop a robust procedure to prioritize the road defects, risk management activities. The system comprises a file process, automatic data collection, then assessment with the defect identification, capturing, then real-time uploading to a system, create work orders, very short time period, and prioritize to fix all the defects, improve efficiency. Another example we developed is a so-called Loop 360 digital solution to assess the railway tunnel conditions using computer vision, data science technology to tackle those defects in the tunnels, being the track, being civil walls, or being the signaling systems in remote and hard to reach environment. This enables operators and the asset manager to have very meaningful, trackable insights to make better maintenance decisions with significantly improved efficiency and accuracy. Equally, we are beginning to deploy very sophisticated methods now for designing our buildings. It's becoming increasingly challenging in design buildings because people who own and operate and develop buildings are getting much more demanding about what they want. It's not just the amount of gross floor areas they want, but also they want to make sure that buildings are shaded. They want to make sure that there is maximum areas for solar paneling, for instance. They want to make sure that design of the building is compatible with the way in which climate is going to change. They also want us to design buildings with much lower carbon material. They want buildings that enhance preserve nature. So this is an example where in Amsterdam, where our team have developed use generative algorithms that cycle through huge numbers of different choices around some of the critical outcomes that a building owner wants to achieve. In this case, that was lower carbon and the building that contribute to nature, as well a fantastic place to live and work. Another project we did in Amsterdam, in fact. So one of the things we are doing in order to try and tackle the challenge of sustainability is to design buildings with a much lower embodied carbon. And in some cases, that involves using wood at a much larger scale. It's quite challenging from a structural point of view to understand how the stresses and strengths of a 20-story building actually fills through a structure that has more than 50% of wood. So again, we have used advanced digital modeling, embedded machine learning algorithms to design a multi-story building for the first time ever using the 50% wood instead of concrete actually in Europe, reducing the embodied carbon of the building by 50%. And of course, we're also trying to use new materials in the building. We have actually developed using those fungi, mycorrhizas, and panels for buildings, which are acoustic panels based on the fungi. I know this sounds like sort of a bit strange, but we'll really try to innovate as much as we can, but create different and use different kinds of material. But again, we can only use those new materials through the power of digital data and technology underpinning it. Not just when it comes to the design of buildings, but how they are operated. Again, most enormous opportunities there that we see from using those core technologies to improve what we do. The first example on the left-hand side, you might be very, very familiar with. This is called Neuron. That's a Hong Kong-based building management system that we have developed and also formed a joint venture with Venturous, our host care. And again, because of Ventures, you may well know of it. It empowers data. The neuron system empowers the data-driven building management and the energy efficiency. And it improves occupancy health, reduce significant energy costs, optimize the chiller systems, anticipating the failure of things such as AHUs, air handling units, to make the building a really, really intelligent one to live and breathe. On another hand, another example, there's gonna be no solution to make buildings net zero in operations without fully digitalize the buildings so they can become 100% electrical. So just as the energy system transition is going to need digital and data, so the transition within the building is going to be need the same. And we have a building in London which is 100% electric. To our best knowledge, it's probably one of the only buildings so far in the world 100% electrical. But it only operates because of the sophistication of the data and the control system that are completely embedded in creating those outcomes. As well as trying to operate our buildings in a better way, another thing we need to do fundamentally is to decarbonize them and make them far more resilient to the climate change that we know is already happening. So one of the challenges that many organizations that own and operate many buildings, i.e. portfolios of buildings, face is to meet the decarbonization of those buildings. In some parts of the world, particularly in Europe, there are some very stringent standards being developed for operational carbon performance of the buildings, and those standards are rising over time as well. As a result of that, what building asset owners are finding is that a number of their buildings will become stranded assets, become valueless unless they tackle seriously the move towards a reduced carbon usage required by those standards. And that's a profound challenge for a lot of them. We did a piece of work with a European building owner, and we look at assessing 200 of their buildings against the rising carbon standards in Europe. Very interestingly, we found that by 2030, half of their buildings will become stranded. That is only about 5-6 years away from now. And by 2045, their entire building stock would have no value, which presents a huge risk to them. So in Arup, we develop digital tools and solutions such as CRISP on the left to assess the carbon footprint of a portfolio of those buildings and provide recommendations to the asset owners around cost-effective ways of achieving the decarbonization of those building portfolios. And we see that it's only going to become more and more significant and important to those building owners. And likewise, for climate resilience, many existing buildings were built against the forecast of climate, such as heat, rain, hurricane, seismic, from more than 20 to 30 years ago. Those forecasts are changing each year as climate change becomes a reality. Because the pattern of the weather is always changing, heat is rising, hurricanes are more frequent. So we need to make sure we are more climate resilient for those building assets. So again, we have developed sophisticated algorithm to understand and reinterpret how those changes are impacting our existing buildings, to help our building as owner to understand what can be done to make the building stock more climate resilient. Again, enormous change and opportunities are taking place. The opportunity to use technology and data is there to help them to resolve that problem. So probably, let me just finally give another example. Some very significant, important area that we see are, which I mentioned right at the start, that it need to use a better than what we already got. Some couple examples we have here. The first one is an example of offshore wind. As we probably agree, there's no net zero world without huge amount of offshore wind. And currently, we think there's probably about 500 gigawatts of stored offshore winds in the next 10 to 15 years. But of course, we now face a challenge of wind farms that we built 10 to 15 years ago that are coming towards the end of their design life. So what can we do with those built a while back? Certainly, we can scrap them and rebuild them, but that's going to be incredibly costly and carbon intensive. So in Arup, we look at this problem and we found that the only part of an offshore wind farm that isn't replaceable is the monopole, the foundation. Those foundations in an offshore wind farm, when it's fixed to the seafloor, they are pounded thousands of times by jackhammer into seabed. So they are built to withstand extraordinary stresses. However, over the last decade, our turbine towers have got higher, turbines have got much bigger. They probably double in size. The stress and the strength that are hitting a monopile that is in a very inhospitable part of the world. As you know, the sea is not really friendly to steel. It has caused corrosion, it has moving seabed, etc. So it's a complex engineering problem to resolve. We took it along how we can understand whether the foundation of an offshore wind farm are robust or not, and what state of repair, disrepair run are, and are they in what's the expected lifetime of the asset. Once we genuinely understand how it's performing, we have what we did was we took some sensors and installed them on some of those subsea bases to start to understand the degradation of those assets. Then we also, this data also allows us to predict for each of those assets, the lifespan and the conditions. Then we found that by working with this particular wind farm operator, offshore wind farm operator, we found that we can safely extend the life of an offshore wind farm by different number of years, and it depends on the conditions. So sometimes up to 15 years. This really an enormous new value being given to the owner of this offshore wind farm, because they thought they are gonna have to rebuild all of them. So, but they now suddenly got 15 years of existing use. But of course, it's also good for the planet because we are avoiding the carbon that will be generated by scrapping the those wind farms and doing them again. So we have now reached a level of certification that we can forecast the remaining life of every single one of those windshore farms on a monthly basis, and we can provide that new prediction back to the owner. So we have brought together, again, sophisticated engineering knowledge and the data to generate and unlock huge new value for the owners and the operator of the wind farms, but also meeting the needs of our planet. Of course, that can go for many other sources of infrastructure as well. On the right-hand side is an example of the long span bridge in Holland, quite a few projects there. Holland built most of its long span bridges 50 years ago. which predict to be in the design life for 50 years. So based on that design life 50 years, many of them are predicted to collapse soon, actually, which is a real problem for Holland. So again, we have built system, in this case, a digital way to look into assess that. In this case, it's a bridge. We get 70 billion of data points in a month to understand the structural status of the bridge and how to operate, how to use. Then we did a lot of analysis and find a new way to refurbish and renew and repair the asset. So we can last those bridges for another 10 to 20 years. I probably will, given the time here, I probably will end here. But at the end of that, this session, I really would like to highlight that, as I've been keep highlighting here, is the both challenge opportunities ahead of us are huge. However, as one firm, no matter how big we are, how strong we are, we really can't do it alone. I really hope through this session, either now or later on, we can exchange our really thoughts among the industry, the ecosystems, and the views, our views, and find opportunities to collaborate to resolve those challenges together and through digital means. Thank you. That probably concludes my presentation.
So at the start of the presentation, Dr. Xu, you mentioned that there is, given the infancy of the digitalization in the built environment. So just wanting to find out from you, what are some of the key building blocks that you believe needs to be in place for significant progress to be made in the built environment?
Immediately coming to my mind, probably there are three challenges we look at, and also three things we need to look at to strengthen the means to digitally resolve the challenges. The first one is actually we really have to collaborate. Between the industries. I think towards the end, as I said, towards the end of my presentation, we really need to get all the people together because we have limited resources. Because the construction sector is a traditional sector, and we don't have much profit margin. The investment in R&D is very limited. So instead of each individual partner in the ecosystem do their own, it's actually a lot powerful. We all put the resource together and share the knowledges. Second is to create this to have this collaboration, we need to create a common platform where we can collaborate and contribute. I think that is really difficult considering the wide spectrum of the projects we do, the challenge we have. But this is something, again, if we put all the good minds together and goodwill together with the money together, that is something we can create. The last part is always very tricky, is the data sharing and data governance part. So we need to find solutions to share the data securely and transparently between the partners. And thankfully, that's now that sort of new technology gradually made available to securely share the data.
Maybe if you could help to answer this other question as well, because to many building owners, ROI is very important when they decide to invest in smart building technology. So maybe if you can explain what are some particular relations with smart energy saving and operational efficiency and how you can quantify the ROI?
Yeah, it is a very challenging return on investment is really difficult to establish to start with. Even before we look at the return on investment, actually look at the baseline. The way to assess the baseline could be different approach as well, because the importance of the baseline will impact the return on investment assessment and also impact on how much the technology providers willing to get into the sort of the ecosystem and to get the money return to be inspired or encouraged to further develop it. And also from the operation side, from asset owner side, they also want to know where they can get the big bucks back and justify to their own organizations and then share. I think the key things I think is establish a way to establish a sort of common way to establish a baseline. Number two is instead of looking at in one individual sort of project that happens, but many of those clients we saw, they get the most benefit is actually look at the whole portfolio of the buildings. So if they can look at the scale of that, a large scale many portfolio buildings across their national or global regional sort of asset, can get a lot more return because of the commonality what they get, the knowledge they gain.
So in that sense, then what can you sort of recommend some of the most cost-effective technologies and approach for retrofitting existing buildings to meet the current smart and sustainable standards? What are some things that, older buildings can start to kick off with?
Yeah. To start with, I think one example I didn't show here is we have a project in Australia, in Sydney. The building owner was thinking it's in a very iconic location in Australia. The building owner was thinking actually take that down, actually to just going to rebuild it because yes, it is the carbon intensive, but to them again, look at the asset value, that return on investment probably from monetary perspective is a lot of incentive for them to do so. However, we did look at this, to really understand what sort of incentive they have instead of just going with technology, talk to them what carbon and what sustainability means to them. But we really look at what their primary goals are well, then work with them. So what the first thing we did was with the understanding of that is to understand what are the primary goals they want to achieve. Is that at gross floor areas and other things they want to do, the technology you want to achieve to get better tenants. So we work with them actually. So in the end, the decision was instead of taking the whole building down, actually we rebuild it. So there are different ways of that. So it's not directly just technology start with, right? Technology, it start with what the use case is, what those building owners would like to achieve through the design or smart technology. So that's the first thing we need to understand it. So then once that is understood well, then we need to look at other all aspects of it. How to get the building smart, using various technology we already mentioned. To start with, very simply, as a landlord, they will look at all the whole air conditioning system, for instance, the energy use, what sort of energy they use. Do they use the traditional fuel energies, or can they actually change to 100% electricity, as what we mentioned earlier in another project? And then look at efficiency of the whole operating systems, air conditioning systems, which spend a lot of carbons, operation carbons to produce. Then the next journey is actually the collaboration between the landlord as well as the tenants, how tenants would like to use and how landlord collaborate with them and sharing data to gather whatever information from the tenant's operation, support their own tenant's operation, but also to reduce the energy usage. So not specific, I guess it's not a specific technology perspective, it's more of what we want on the building want to operate, the uses, what the ambition they want to achieve, and we support that and provide the right technology for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. A question from the audience. So this participant asked, what's your view about the adoption of BIM in the construction industry? Is it high? Can you provide a rough percentage? And what are the tangible benefits of BIM?
For the BIM information management system, it depends, really depends where. If you ask me to assess each individual one, it's very hard to say. Each individual maturity different in different countries and in developed world and developing world. But what we can see is the whole trend of getting the beam information, the BRM, into the higher standard. In the old days when it just started, I remember we look at the different what is the owner going to do, what the consultant to do. Is that going to do consultant typically do up to 200 to 300? Then we hand over to the contractor, ask them to do certain things. And but we really realize that if we really want to build to assess the digital twin, to look at the virtual replica of the building itself and provide insights back to the building, we really need to have more sophisticated the BIM information system in place. So getting more and more working across the whole system through the collaboration from initial inception of a project to actually get all the ecosystem parties together, partners together, including owners, operators, designers, contractors together. So towards the BIM 500 level. So therefore, you can have all those leverage the virtual replica of the digital replica of the physical asset to optimize operation, to maintain the asset well, more reliable and more efficiently. So the level of maturity in each country we saw is really quite different, but the direction is going towards a high level of BIM, and then use that for the digital applications.
Thank you. Perhaps you can end off with one. We can end off with one last question since it's turning 6. Considering the rapid pace of technology change, what can stakeholders in the built environment? How can stakeholders in the built environment ensure long-term flexibility and adaptability of smart buildings?
I think it's again we need to look at the depends what the use case really want to achieve, but generally I think that from what we can see, and we strongly see the messaging from my presentation just now is we want to create, we really live in the planetary boundaries, right? 80% of buildings are being built. We need to use that, and we already use 80% of that carbon budget where we want to be. So we're really to take this seriously. To take that seriously, then we need to say we must work out the outcome. So each organization have our own decarbonization. Thanks God, we have each of our organization, majority of them have their own target now. So what's important now is actually to first of all establish where the baseline is, then we'll have a work out a roadmap towards the outcome. To work out the outcome, then we need to do some optimization because it involves cost, involves priorities, involves the people implementing those technologies in the smart buildings. So we need to really look at the baseline, then the goals, then optimize the whole process, a roadmap, then continuously to monitor that.
Hey, thank you. So I think that kind of concludes, and like Dr. Xu said, this is really a long-term project that the world needs to work on, and we all need to collaborate and first identify goals to work towards. So I think technology is continuously progressing, and it's not too late to adopt anything now. And then moving forward, there will be more things that come about to support this whole long-term progress. So thank you all for joining us for today's session.